joining me for more on this is U.S. Ambassador Charles Stith, the chairman of the African Presidential Leadership Center, who was also a former ambassador to Tanzania. And also I have Tilewa Adebajo, the CEO of CFG Advisory. Thank you so much for joining me on the show, gentlemen. And let me start with Ambassador Charles here. And I'd like to get your look on the race to the White House. And do you think the Democrats can flip Georgia?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to be with you. I think this election is extraordinarily close. Whether we take Georgia or whether Biden takes Nevada, have all been impacted by the lockdown. If you recall, in the last presidential debate, President Trump accused Biden of being committed to keeping the country locked down, not only in the present, but into the future. And Biden failed to offer a really clear and cogent response. Now, the greatest evidence that the lockdown has been a factor is when you look at the returns in the state of Nevada. Over 206,000 workers have been negatively impacted by the lockdown. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won Nevada by 27,000 votes. Today, former Vice President Biden is clinging onto a lead of a little bit more than 7,000 votes. If you don't make the connection between the opposition to the lockdown and how it's impacted on the vote, you're not living on this planet.
All right, now let me bring in Tilewa Adebajo here, who's the CEO of CFG Advisory, and I'd like to get your thoughts on the race to the White House and what it means generally.
Well, I think, as the ambassador has mentioned, this is a very unique race. And I think what is even making it more unique is the sense that there's a lot at stake. America is definitely divided. It's quite polarized, and you're seeing the impact of the urban areas where you have more of a diversity of ethnicity, and you're seeing the voting along those lines. What is more impressive is the turnout. And I think over 100 million people had even voted before the elections itself started. So it's a close race, it's a cliffhanger, and a lot is at stake. And, a lot is at stake. And as we can see, there are several paths to victory. The key states now are Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. I think that's clear. It's clear that Trump will probably take Alaska. And the key issue now is who is going to win Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. And I think those states eventually will decide the race.
Well, now, Ambassador Charles, looking at what Tilewa just said now, and referring to some of the swing states that we're looking at, we're seeing it on the knife edge and still too early to call, though. But I would like to get your thoughts on this and also the states that the Democrats were able to flip.
Well, I mean, at this point, it looks like the main state that it's going to be flipped this time around is Arizona. But I really do want to come back to this theme that ultimately, I mean, clearly, our politics have been polarized for years. The polarization that we're seeing in American politics is nothing new as in terms of 2020. The critical factor here, and I'm convinced of this, and I think the data will show it after we get past this election, is that this election has been defined by the politics of the lockdown. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 41% of the 160 plus million voters in this election have been adversely impacted by the lockdown. And for those of us who have been fortunate enough or blessed enough to have some resources or have some economic reserves, dealing with the lockdown has been an inconvenience. On the other hand, if you're a restaurant worker or an airline worker or a casino worker, as is the case in Nevada, And those industries have been extraordinarily hard hit. When the issue of the lockdown is interjected into this debate, into this election dynamic, it's impossible to ignore the impact that this dynamic has on this race. So I agree that we're polarized, but I think if Biden had handled more deftly this issue relative to the lockdown, I think he would have fared significantly better, and this election would be nowhere near as close.
All right, Tilewa, when you look at the results we've seen so far, we're looking at the makeup of the Senate here, and I would like you to speak on why you think that Senate majority is important in the next administration.
Well, I think definitely to pass policies, you don't want another deadlock in the Senate, or you have a situation whereby Republicans are in control of the Senate, Democrats have the House, and the White House is Democrat. So that will obviously affect policy, and there will be a logjam, as you saw with the last years of the Obama administration, being unable to pass any significant far-reaching policies. That race, I think, is now in the favor of the Democrats. The last time I checked, it was 47-47, and there were 6 seats left. So we'll see the outcome of that, but I think clearly the Republicans retaining the Senate, I think, and the Democrats have the White House and also the Congress, will eventually mean that there will be deadlock in terms of getting passage of policy through. But if the president can reach out across the aisle and look at a bipartisan approach, then he can get things done. But then that is also a critical race that we also need to look at. But right now, it looks like the Republicans will definitely retain the Senate.
All right, Ambassador Stith, I'd like to get your thoughts on the makeup of the Senate.
Well, I was going to say, I would agree that at this point, it does look like the Republicans are going to maintain control of the Senate. Interestingly, this might get a lot closer in terms of the division of the Senate between the Republicans and the Democrats. We are picking up on the Democratic side a couple of seats in the great state of Georgia. There will be a runoff for the 2 Senate seats that were up for election this time. So, while it's easy to conclude that given the partisan divide that we'll see more deadlock in the Senate, I think it's important to appreciate that Joe Biden is a creature of the Senate. He spent more than 30 years of his career in that body. And during the Obama administration, he demonstrated an ability to get the Senate to work cooperatively with the administration on the stimulus and recovery package in the backdrop of the 2008 debacle. He was very effective. And also in getting Obamacare passed. I think the critical thing that is going to determine the extent of cooperation that he gets is going to be how he sequences the issues to which he gives priority. Again, it might sound like I'm beating a drum here. The first thing on his agenda has got to be ending the lockdown or a plan for the lockdown. I think that starts with building an international consensus. Until we're past lockdown, you can't do recovery. I think the next thing that he wants to put on the table is the infrastructure package that's been a point of conversation now for more than a decade. That clearly would pump more money into the economy. It would clearly put more people to work. And I think it would make a difference. I would also add that we can expect probably during his first term, another novel coronavirus. I explore these issues in the recent book of View from the Other Side, Lockdown in South Africa. And how he prepares the United States and prepares the world to deal with this next pandemic is going to define his administration. And I think if he sequences what he does with these things in mind, I think that he'll be able to get some cooperation from the Republican side of the aisle. It won't be universal, but given how close the numbers will be in terms of Democrats and Republicans in the Senate, I believe he's got a good shot at being able to peel off enough Republicans to get some substantial and important things done.
All right, Tilewa, we've seen that the United States has been quite divided in recent times when you look at how things are playing out. But I'd like you to speak on that American democracy post-election and the work for the next president to reunite the country.
Well, I think as the ambassador has mentioned, I think clearly there's a lot of divisions, and I think Joe Biden hadn't been in the Senate, understands how to work that system and to be able to get the consensus that he needs. Post-election, what I'm more concerned about is what is the benefit to Africa. Yes, the Americans will eventually resolve their issues. A vaccine is on the line. We're hearing that vaccines will be available by Christmas. So I think we're beginning to see the end of this lockdown and the pandemic, because a lot of vaccines are already in the play, which should start coming up next year. So I think what is more important is that I think the Americans have a path to recovery. And if Joe Biden wins this election, I think it's clear that he understands what he needs to do to work through the Senate. Because Nancy Pelosi, as you know, she's a very hard nut to crack. And she's given the Trump administration a lot of bloody nose, not just once, but several times. But what is more important for me is the fact that since George W. Bush, what you've seen with George W. Bush is that what he did for Africa was just AIDS support in terms of HIV. What you saw with Obama was that Obama focused more on the power sector. The last 4 years, Donald Trump has not really done much for Africa. He's restricted migration from Africa into America. We haven't seen much economic support from the Americans. But I think the beneficiary over the last 4 years maybe has been Sudan, because Sudan has now been taken off the terrorist list. So I think post-election, I think the options of either a Republican or Democratic president is more of the same. And hopefully, if Joe Biden wins as a Democrat, hopefully we can begin to see a change of attitude towards the African continent. And as we've said, with his skills, having been a senator for life, he's able to work that system to be able to get the sort of consensus and reaching out across the aisle to the Republicans to get his policies through. So, we need to see how Africa would benefit from this, because we really haven't seen much from the States in the last 20 years, to be honest with you.
Well, let me, in all due respect,
all right, Ambassador Charles,
colleague,
when you...
Good. I was going to say, in all due respect,
all right, you can continue.
My colleague, his historical analysis was a bit off. I'm a Democrat, but so having said that, I don't feel any particular inclination or the necessity to give more credit to George W. Bush than he's due. But quite frankly, his policy agenda to Africa was the most expansive that we've seen by any American president. I mean, with the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which started under Clinton, we saw something significant and dramatic. Under George W. Bush, he not only expanded the PEPFAR program, which dealt with HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis as well, to an unprecedented level. They initiated the Millennium Challenge Initiative, which supported multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects all over the continent. They expanded the military relationships through AFRICOM, and that laid a basis on which we could build. He also extended AGOA, by the way. unfortunately, we didn't see as much during the Obama administration. But I think with a Biden administration, I think we'll see an uptick in a more progressive response to Africa. But I think the key to that is going to be how Africa defines its needs. You know, it's important when you come to the table that you come with more than an appetite. And I think it's important for African leadership to begin to convene and sort through what are their priorities relative to the continent. I mean, again, I've done a lot of thinking and writing about the COVID crisis. But, you know, in those countries that mimicked Western responses to COVID-19, they suffered devastating impacts to their economy. While on the other hand, a country like Tanzania, which didn't do a hard lockdown, their economy is expected to grow in 2020. They reached middle income status in July, 5 years ahead of schedule. African leadership needs to begin to have some internal conversations about the sorts of things that need to be on their plate and the sorts of conversations that they need to be having with Western countries like the United States. Let me add that
all right, Ambassador.
Because of the degree.
All right, Ambassador. I'm afraid that's all the time we have on this session for now. Well, but definitely a lot of sticking points there and things to note and things to build up on in future conversation. I've been speaking to Ambassador Charles Stith. He's the chairman of the African Presidential Leadership Center, and he was also the former U.S. ambassador to Tanzania, and also Tilewa Adebajo, the CEO of CFG Advisory.